You ever notice how a liar always smiles too much? That's the first thing I remember thinking the day my wife came home smelling like peppermint polish and someone else's cologne. There's a look some people wear when they've just done something they can't admit. A flicker too long in the eyes. A smile that holds a tremor at the edge. Jessica had that look on a Thursday. She said she'd stayed late to help with supply logs at the clinic. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and told her the lasagna was still warm. She called me sweetheart twice that night. Once while setting the table, once while loading the dishwasher. She hadn't used that word in months. I wasn't paranoid. I was just observant. I make a living walking through half-finished homes and spotting hairline cracks that'll turn into lawsuits. People think construction is about hammers and beams. It's not. It's about knowing how things hide behind clean paint and smooth drywall. Jessica worked at Wendell Dental for almost 6 years. She was his right hand, his coordinator, his front and center smile. The building sat 2 blocks off Prince Avenue, all white brick and boutique charm. Inside, they had eucalyptus candles in the lobby and a bubbling water wall near the receptionist's desk. The place looked more like a spa than a clinic. Dr. Ron Wendell was the face of the operation. Late 40s, slick hair, tan year-round, and the kind of handshake that lasted a beat too long. Divorced twice. He hosted barbecues for the staff, posted shirtless running photos on Facebook, and once told me I must be doing something right to land Jessica. I didn't like him, but I trusted her. Or I thought I did. The changes came like creeping fog. First, more makeup on Wednesdays. Then the sudden shift in her playlist. Motown swapped out for upbeat pop. She took longer showers. Guarded her phone like a teenager. She was still kind to me, still asked about my day, but there was distance in the way she nodded. Like she was reading from a script she was tired of performing. I didn't confront her. I started watching. A month passed. One Friday, I wrapped an inspection early and figured I'd surprise her with lunch. Shrimp po' boys from Sanders and 2 big cups of peach tea, extra ice. I walked into the clinic's back in trance, like I always did. Lydia, the receptionist, wasn't at her desk. The hallway smelled like fluoride and something too sweet. Vanilla maybe, or cheap perfume. From behind Wendell's office door, I heard a burst of laughter. Hers, then his, and then silence. I knocked once, stepped in. Jessica was there, coat on, hair slightly mussed. Wendell stood behind her, red-faced, fumbling with a folder. "Oh," she said, voice pitched too high. "You scared me." "Didn't mean to," I said, handing her the bag. "Thought I'd bring you lunch." "That's so sweet, babe," she said, eyes darting toward Wendell. "Just going over end-of-month numbers," he offered, already walking around his desk like he was late for a meeting. "Thanks for stopping by, Dan. You're a good man." I smiled, nodded, and left without a word. In the truck, I sat for 5 minutes, hands still on the steering wheel, watching the clinic's glass doors. At one point, I saw her peek out, then vanish. That night, she cried while brushing her teeth. Said her job was burning her out. I held her like I believed her. But my heart had already left the room. That weekend, I installed a keystroke tracker on the old laptop in our den. Jessica rarely used it, but every once in a while, she'd forget and check her email there. I didn't want to do it, but the not knowing was worse. 3 weeks passed. Then, one Thursday night, I opened the program and found a cache login to her personal email. It didn't take long to find the thread. Hundreds of messages. Subject line: keeping me smiling, smiley face. They joked, flirted, sent each other blurry photos, some of him in the office, flexing like an idiot in scrubs. Hers from the break room, biting her lower lip like some teenager in heat. He called her his secret sauce. She said he made her feel young and weightless. One message broke me in half. She wrote, "Dan's kind. So stable. I feel awful sometimes. But I can't stop thinking about you. When you lean in behind me at the chair, it drives me insane." He replied, "I want to take that white coat off you slowly. Next slow night, stay after." I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a pulse. I felt cold. Not rage. Not yet. Just that sinking realization that the life I was living had already ended. I just hadn't been informed. I scrolled further. They had a plan. He told her to wait a few more weeks. Said she should ease me into it, like I was some soft animal they had to put down gently. That night, I slept in the guest room. She asked if I was getting sick. I told her I had a headache. She offered to rub my temples. I told her I just needed quiet. The next morning, I pretended everything was fine. made her coffee, told her good luck with the Henderson kids' cleanings. She smiled and said, "You're too good to me." And in that moment, something hard and final settled in my chest. I didn't rush. I started laying groundwork the way a builder lays rebar before concrete. Quiet, careful, thorough. I called in a few favors. One of the HVAC techs I worked with had recently done some after-hours repairs at the clinic. I asked him how their security worked. He mentioned a back panel near the staff room that hadn't been updated since 2014. I drove by the place at night, learned the rhythms, who closed, when the lights went off, how often the cleaning crew came. Meanwhile, I started seeing more of Kate, Jessica's best friend. She'd been around for years. They met in nursing school. Smart, sharp, quietly funny. Her marriage had crashed the year before, and we'd grown closer lately, mostly through shared silences and the occasional beer on her back porch. There was something there. I didn't act on it. Not yet. But I caught her looking at me once, long and curious, like she saw something waking up. One night, she asked me how things were at home. I just said, "Changing." She nodded and didn't press. Just handed me another drink and sat beside me while the cicadas hummed. When the time was right, I let myself into Wendell Dental at 2:14 a.m. on a Monday. Gloves. Flashlight. No cameras in the hallway confirmed that weeks earlier. I used a magnetized key copy I'd made from a wax imprint off Jessica's purse. Inside his office, I moved fast, dug through drawers, pulled USB drives, took photos of patient logs, invoices, controlled substance logs that didn't quite add up. The DEA takes a very close look at Schedule II inconsistencies. Found something else, too, a burner phone, tucked behind a framed certificate. Their messages were all there. He'd been using it for her. I didn't take it. I just copied everything off it. By the time I walked out, I had enough to plant seeds. Just had to decide how I wanted them to grow, slow and strangling, or fast and explosive. I drove home with the windows down, the night air sharp in my lungs. Back at the house, Jessica was asleep on my side of the bed, snoring softly, wearing his clinic hoodie, and I smiled. The morning after I broke into Wendell Dental, I made pancakes. Jessica came downstairs yawning, wearing his hoodie like it was her second skin. She kissed my cheek and poured coffee like nothing had shifted. Maybe for her, nothing had. Maybe she thought I was still the man she married, still the quiet rock, dependable and blind. She didn't see the USB drive tucked under the fruit bowl, or notice the slight tremor in my hand when I flipped her pancake. "I'm working a double today," she said between bites. "Wendell's got that complicated crown replacement on Mrs. Granger." I nodded. "You're good at those." She smiled. "He says I've got the hands of a pianist." I looked up from my plate. "And he would know?" She laughed, nervously. "I just meant he says that to everyone." I let the silence hang there. She filled it with small talk about a sale on throw pillows. I'd always heard betrayal felt like fire. For me, it was ice, slow and precise. The kind that makes your fingertips go numb before you realize you're bleeding. That day, I sent the first anonymous tip. Not to the police. Not yet. That would have been too clean. Too official. I wanted rot, not explosion. I wanted him to slowly drown in the stink of his own mess. I emailed the Georgia Dental Board. Patient safety complaint. Attached a few photos of medication logs, inconsistencies in controlled substances, expired cartridges being relabeled, open access to narcotics. Then I contacted a local health blogger who ran a watchdog newsletter called Athens Underbite. Small-time stuff, but she had a following. I sent her photos of Wendell's supply closet, dirty, overstocked, and one pic of a box marked sterile sitting half open next to a leaking bottle of bleach. A few days later, she published a post. "Is your dentist cutting corners?" Wendell Dental was photo number 2. Jessica read it out loud over dinner. "Oh my God," she said. "Look at this. That's our supply closet." I played dumb. "That looks bad." She squinted at the watermark. "Someone snuck in. That's crazy." I shrugged. Maybe a patient took the wrong turn. Her fingers tightened around her wine glass. The second move was riskier. I forged a fake referral letter, a complaint about Wendell's billing practices. Used an old county template I still had from a site inspection with a medical office. Sloppy accounting, patients being double charged for procedures, upcoding, billing insurance for treatments never performed. Sent it to a friend at the Georgia Department of Insurance. He didn't need to know the whole story, just enough to raise flags. By the end of the week, Wendell's receptionist had 3 voicemails from insurance reps requesting audits. One showed up unannounced. Jessica mentioned it while folding laundry. "They're sniffing around," she muttered. It's probably nothing. I just nodded and said, you guys keep things pretty tidy, right? She hesitated. Mostly. Around that time, Kate started texting more often. It started innocently checking in about random things, asking if I'd fixed the flickering porch light yet. She sent me a picture of her dog in a cone, followed by, he hates it. Looks how I feel some days. I told her I knew the feeling. She replied with a single line that stuck with me. Some wounds you can't bandage. You just let them bleed until they scar. I didn't answer right away. I read it twice. Thought about her. Thought about how she'd always seen through Jessica's charm, never said it out loud. But it was in the way she rolled her eyes when Jess bragged about spa days or how the guys at work are always flirting. I hadn't touched Kate. Not yet. But the space between us was shrinking by the day. Jessica started getting paranoid. She came home one night slamming her purse down harder than usual. Ron says someone's out to get him, she snapped. He thinks it's one of the hygienists. Or maybe his ex-wife. I didn't look up from the sink. What makes him think that? Someone's leaking stuff. Board's asking questions. He's freaking out. She poured herself a double whiskey, something she never used to do on weeknights. Stared out the window like she expected headlights to come barreling into the yard. That night, she curled up beside me and whispered, "Promise me we're okay." I kissed the top of her head. We're perfect. By the end of the month, I'd mapped out every vulnerability that clinic had. The narcotics logbook? Missing entire weeks. Their lead shielding for x-rays? Cracked. I had photos. I even got hold of one of Wendell's malpractice waivers. Sloppy legal work. Missing signatures. I passed a copy to a paralegal I knew who owed me a favor. Told her to forward it to a personal injury attorney who loved low-hanging fruit. I wanted Wendell buried in paper cuts before the scalpel even came out. And it worked. He started showing up late. Missed a Thursday cleaning rotation. A hygienist quit. Patients began canceling. The office's Yelp rating dipped from 4.8 to 3.2 in 2 weeks. Someone, not me, posted a review that said, "Hope you like MRSA with your molar work." I watched it all unfold like a man watching a building he condemned collapse in slow motion. Controlled. I didn't need fire. I needed mildew. Collapse from the inside. Jessica, meanwhile, started cracking. She accused Wendell's ex of planting stories. Then thought maybe Lydia had turned on them. She called it workplace betrayal. The irony nearly choked me. One night she said she wanted to reconnect, lit candles, played jazz. I played along, just enough to keep her sleeping soundly. But the whole time I imagined Wendell sitting in his leather chair, sweating through his scrubs while another audit request hit his inbox. And Kate's words came back again. Let it bleed until it scars. There's a moment in every teardown where the roof starts to sag, where you know the structure's too far gone to save. You don't have to push anymore. You just step back and let gravity do the rest. Wendell was about to reach that point. Jessica just didn't know the whole house was coming down with him. And I wasn't done. Not by a mile. By early November, Wendell's hands had started to shake. It was subtle, but I caught it. The way he fumbled a pen on the news clip that ran during the local morning show. A fluff segment on Athens dental month. You could see it if you looked close. The flinch in his smile, the tightness in his jaw. That's the look of a man realizing he's not under attack. He's under siege. The Department of Insurance hadn't just sniffed. They'd bitten. Sent in auditors. Froze 3 months of reimbursements. And the dental board? They weren't asking politely anymore. Jessica came home with tension in her neck, so sharp it looked like it hurt to blink. He's losing it, she muttered one night, while tossing a bag of frozen peas onto her shoulder. Says someone's trying to ruin him. I nodded like I was only half listening. He thinks it's Shelley, she went on. His second wife. Says she still has keys. But Lydia says it might be Tony, one of the techs he fired last year. I set down my beer. Funny how he's surrounded by people who want him ruined. She didn't say anything. Just stared at the wall for a long moment, jaw twitching. Are you okay? I asked, watching her carefully. She hesitated. Sometimes I feel like I'm next. I nearly smiled. Why would you think that? She looked at me like she wasn't sure. A few days later, I made my move on the building itself. Wendell Dental was old. A remodeled house from the 40s, retrofitted into a clinic sometime in the early 2000s. They never replaced the subfloor insulation. The electrical was barely up to code. And most importantly, the basement, which was supposed to store backup records and hazardous disposal units, wasn't sealed properly. I knew this because I got in. I waited for the first frost of the year. Early morning fog, low visibility, perfect conditions. I wore my inspection badge and a company fleece from my old contractor job. If anyone saw me, they'd assume I was just a hired tech doing weatherproofing. I let myself in through the rusted storm hatch behind the shrub line, same way I did the first time. Inside, it smelled like mold and despair. I snapped photos of the cracked pipes, the corroded water heater, the exposed biohazard boxes, several of them stacked crooked, oozing some kind of yellow gel. I didn't even need to fabricate anything. Reality was already breaking the law. I sent the full packet to the Georgia Environmental Health Division under an anonymous burner account with a fabricated whistleblower name. Gave them every violation, time-stamped and neatly labeled. Attached a mock employee complaint for good measure. I wanted the city to see the infection before I lanced it open. The following week, 2 inspectors showed up unannounced. Shut down the entire lower level. Slapped a big orange sticker on the storm door that said, "Entry prohibited, environmental hazard." The local newspaper ran a story. Prominent Athens dentist under fire for safety violations. They didn't name the whistleblower. They never would. But inside my living room, Jessica stood frozen, holding her phone in both hands, eyes wide. "This is bad," she whispered. "This is really, really bad." I asked her if she wanted tea. Kate showed up that weekend with chili and cornbread. Said she accidentally made too much. We sat on my porch under the heat lamps. Her eyes caught mine in that quiet way people look when they know the truth, but aren't ready to say it out loud. "Jess still pretending everything's fine?" she asked. "She's pretending the ship isn't sinking because she hasn't felt the water on her feet yet." Kate stirred her chili, then looked up. "You're different lately." "How so?" "Quieter. But not in a bad way. Like someone who's already made their decision and doesn't need to talk about it." I didn't respond. I just passed her another slice of cornbread and watched the steam drift off her bowl. We didn't touch, but her knee rested close enough to mine that I could feel the warmth through my jeans. The next day, Jessica got a call from the dental board. She paced the kitchen like a feral cat, hissing at every noise. They wanted her to come in for a statement. Said it was just procedural, that they needed staff input on Wendell's handling of compliance records. She asked if I thought she needed a lawyer. I said maybe, but only if there's something to hide. She stared at me, unsure if I meant it as comfort or warning. That night, she didn't come to bed. Slept on the couch, or at least pretended to. I didn't check. Meanwhile, I made one last move. The kind of move you only make when you've accepted that consequences don't matter anymore. I used a spoofing app to call Wendell's personal line, mimicking the dental board's caller ID. Told him they were issuing a temporary license suspension pending investigation. Gave him a fake badge number. Told him to expect a formal letter within 48 hours. I wanted to see how fast he'd unravel. According to Jessica, who came home late, buzzed, and venting, he didn't even finish his afternoon appointments. Walked out of the clinic mid-cleaning and told Lydia to shut it all down. Said he needed to get ahead of the narrative. He didn't show up to work the next 2 days. Jessica took over the desk. Tried to calm patience. But I could see it in her, the slow realization that the man she thought would replace me was actually the one dragging her down with him. Late that week, I got a text from Kate. "I'm heading out to the lake for the weekend. No one around. If you need air, it's quiet out here." I stared at the screen for a long time. Replied, "Might take you up on that. Not tonight. Not yet. But soon." By then, the town had started to whisper. A local mom group had flagged Wendell Dental as a questionable provider. Insurance reps had begun pulling reimbursements for the last 90 days. I knew because one of them, someone I used to coach Little League with, mentioned it over beers. "You hear about that creep show clinic," he said. "I think somebody's got it out for them." I just smiled and said, "Guess some people finally got tired of fake smiles." Jessica was unraveling by the day. Her appetite shrank. She stopped wearing makeup. Came home quiet, went to bed earlier, flinched when her phone buzzed. She knew something had shifted. She just didn't know who had shifted it. And she had no idea how much farther she had left to fall. Jessica came home the night it all collapsed looking like someone who just stepped out of a car crash. Makeup smudged, hair pinned up in a crooked mess, blouse unbuttoned one too many down. She stood in the doorway like the house might bite her. I was already at the kitchen table, eating leftover ribs. She didn't say a word. Just walked past me, opened the freezer, and pulled out a half-melted pint of ice cream. No spoon. Just sat at the counter and stared at the wall, digging her fingers into the cold paper carton like it could give her answers. After a minute, she said, "He's done." "Wendell." They pulled his license. I didn't look up. That was fast. No, it wasn't, she muttered. It's been coming for weeks. He just didn't tell anyone. That part was true. The Georgia Dental Board had made it official. A summary judgment, gross negligence, falsified treatment logs, improper storage of controlled substances, and failure to maintain hygienic conditions. The wording was dry, clinical, bloodless. But the sentence might as well have been tattooed on his forehead. License revoked. Permanent. No appeal. They didn't shut him down because of a single violation. They shut him down because the whole foundation was cracked and leaking infection into everything above it. Jessica paced the kitchen like the walls were closing in. Do you know what it's like to give everything to something and watch it just fall apart in real time? She asked. I didn't answer right away. She kept going. I covered for him. I stayed late. I cleaned up his screw-ups. I helped him fake an equipment calibration log once because he forgot to schedule the technician. And now they're going to investigate everyone who ever worked there like we're criminals. Her hands were shaking. She didn't even notice the melted ice cream dripping down her wrist. You thought he was going to save you, I said, finally. She looked at me, stunned. That's what this was, wasn't it? I continued. He made you feel seen. Told you that you were the real reason things worked. Said he couldn't do it without you. She blinked hard, like she was about to argue. But no sound came out. You weren't going to run off with him, I said. You were already running. He just made it feel like a destination instead of a mistake. Silence. She sat down, real slow, like her legs had finally realized the truth and stopped pretending they were built to carry her through it. The next day, I left a manila envelope on the coffee table. No name. No note. Inside were screenshots of text threads from the burner phone Wendell kept hidden behind his dental license certificate, the one I'd cloned during my first break-in. Not just between him and Jessica. There were others. 2 hygienists. 1 assistant from 2019. 1 patient, a woman who stopped coming in after 2 visits and left a vague 1-star review about inappropriate comments on Google. They all followed the same pattern. Charm, promises, innuendo, exploitation. Jessica had told herself she was special. That's how men like Wendell operate. Make every woman feel like she's the only one in the room while they're counting down the minutes to the next. She sat on the couch and read every message in that envelope. Every digital breadcrumb of her erasure. I watched her break, not loud, not violent, but in that small, final way that people break when the lie they wrap themselves in turns out to be see-through. I didn't know, she said quietly. You knew enough, I said. You just didn't want to lose the dream. She shook her head. He told me. We were going to open a new office. He said he wanted me to be manager. Full-time. Handle payroll. Scheduling. He said I made things easier for him. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You thought he was building something for you, I said. But he was just building a distraction. She stood suddenly, angry now, too late for it to matter. Why do you care, Dan? Why do you even pretend to care what I thought? I looked at her. Not cruel. Not kind. Just done. I don't. Not anymore. I just want the truth in the air. That weekend, she packed a suitcase and drove to her sister's place in Macon. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't try to explain. Just left behind a house that still smelled faintly of peppermint polish and that sweet dental-grade cinnamon rinse she used to keep in the bathroom. On the fridge, a note written in smudged Sharpie. I don't know how I got here. I just know I can't stay. I left it there for a week, then tossed it in the trash with the expired soy milk. Meanwhile, Wendell was officially toxic. Word spread fast in a town like ours. Turns out, when your license is revoked for malpractice and health violations, you don't get many second chances, especially not when someone anonymously sends your burner phone records to your ex-wife's divorce attorney, your former malpractice insurer, and the local newspaper's investigative columnist. He went radio silent, deleted his social media. The clinic was shuttered, the signs taken down, and the Yelp page disabled by community standards after too many red-flagged reviews. I heard through the grapevine that he tried applying for a teaching position at a vocational school in Augusta. Didn't even make it to the interview. A week later, Kate came by. She didn't say much. Just brought over a homemade lasagna and 2 bottles of wine. I invited her in. We ate in the quiet. No music, no TV, just the soft clink of forks on ceramic. Halfway through the meal, she looked at me and said, "It's quieter here now." Yeah. Better that way. Yeah. We didn't talk about Jessica. We didn't talk about Wendell. We didn't talk about all the things that had cracked and fallen away like old enamel under pressure. We just sat there, like people who'd both seen too much and finally stepped out of the fire. Reputation doesn't fall apart the way people think it does. There's no explosion, no siren. It just softens at the edges. People stop waving as quick. Conversations cut short when you enter the room. Invitations thin out. At first, you think it's coincidence. Then you realize it's just you. That's what happened to Jessica after the clinic shut down. She moved in with her sister down in Macon. Said it was temporary. Said she needed space to get clarity. I didn't argue. I wasn't holding her hostage. That part of our story had already ended. She found part-time work at a pediatric dental place. Smaller operation. Nothing prestigious. Just enough to say she was working. But even from counties away, the whispers followed. Not about the affair, not directly. Most folks in our town didn't need the details. People can sense the truth without ever naming it. They read it in body language, in the way your smile stops reaching your eyes, and how people stop mentioning the thing you used to be proud of. The Wendell situation had become local legend by then. Everyone knew his name, his downfall, his license suspension. What they didn't say out loud, but everyone knew, was who stood next to him while the rot grew. Jessica wasn't blamed. Not fully. But she sure as hell wasn't trusted anymore. She came back to Athens once. Just once. Lydia told me she stopped by the old clinic building to pick up some things she'd stored, a spare coat, a drawer of personal items, some framed certificates. Said she looked tired, worn down, didn't meet anyone's eyes. She said she's thinking of leaving the field altogether, Lydia told me. Said she doesn't feel cut out for it anymore. I didn't say anything, just nodded and changed the subject. Meanwhile, my house had gotten quiet in a good way. No tension humming in the walls. No lies settling into the furniture. Just the sound of the wind moving through the trees and the dull knock of the porch swing against the siding. I kept busy. Took some new inspection work on old properties up in Danielsville. Started rebuilding the fence out back. Got the old push mower running again, even though the neighbors had long offered to lend me theirs. I needed things to work for, even if no one noticed. Kate showed up one Thursday with a cherry pie and a stack of old vinyls. She didn't knock, just tapped on the screen door with the side of her boot and let herself in. Figured you needed something sweet, she said. I poured 2 coffees. We sat out back as the sun dipped under the power lines, the pie between us, cooling in its foil tray. She was wearing that soft flannel she always threw on when she didn't want to impress anyone. At some point, she looked over at me and said, "You feel lighter." "Do I?" "Yeah. Like something fell off you." I nodded. Maybe it did. She didn't press. Just leaned her head against the back of the chair and closed her eyes like she trusted the quiet between us to hold. We didn't talk about Jessica. Not then. Not really. But a few days later, Kate asked if I ever heard from her. Not since she left, I said. She took what she could. Left the rest. Kate nodded. Some people only know how to build when someone else is holding up the frame. I looked at her. You always this good with metaphors? She grinned. Only around quiet men who don't pretend to have it all figured out. The final ripple came in the form of a letter. From the Georgia Dental Board. A follow-up on the investigation, not about Wendell. About staff conduct. Turns out some of the assistants, Jessica included, had signed off on documentation that contradicted submitted records. Nothing criminal, just a formal citation. A failure to meet procedural obligations. A line in a file somewhere that would never go away. I didn't tell anyone about the letter. Didn't need to. I just slid it into the folder with the rest, the emails, the photos, the old burner phone records, and closed the drawer for good. Whatever dream she'd been chasing when she betrayed me, it had already turned to ash. There was nothing left to burn. And me? I kept moving forward. Not fast. Not loud. Just steady. I stained the deck. Cleaned out the attic. Took up early morning walks before the town woke up. Somewhere in the rhythm of rebuilding, I felt something shift. Not a sudden joy. Not peace, exactly. Just room. Room to breathe. Room to be. Kate stayed over one night, after we grilled steaks, listened to records, and sat on the porch while a thunderstorm rolled in. She didn't bring an overnight bag. She didn't need to. We lay in bed with the windows cracked, the smell of rain drifting in, her hand resting on my chest like it belonged there. Nothing urgent. Nothing heavy. Just 2 people who knew what it meant to lose, and still chose to stay. It happened on a Sunday. I just finished fixing the gutter above the back door, ladder still leaning against the siding, gloves tucked into my belt. The air smelled like cut grass and honeysuckle. The kind of early spring day where nothing feels urgent. Then I saw her car. Parked across the street. Same faded blue Honda. Same dent above the back wheel she never got fixed because she always said, "I don't notice it anymore." Jessica stepped out slow, like she wasn't sure her legs still worked in this zip code. She had on jeans and an old UGA hoodie. No makeup. No practiced smile. Just sunken eyes and a clutch of papers in her hand that bent slightly in the breeze. I didn't move. Just watched from the edge of the porch as she crossed the street, walking like she thought she had the right to. She stood at the bottom of the steps, cleared her throat, and said, "Hey, hey." A long silence stretched between us. Wind tugged at the loose sleeve of her hoodie. I thought maybe we could talk," she said. I didn't answer. Not right away. Just looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the woman who cheated. Not anymore. She was what was left after. "I saw Kate's car here a few nights ago," she said, softer now. "You too?" I raised an eyebrow. "That why you came back?" "No," she hesitated. "Yes. I don't know. It's just, I don't know where else to go anymore." There it was. Not regret. Not apology. Displacement. She didn't want me. She wanted what I still had. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly, holding up the papers. "This is just some divorce paperwork stuff. I finally signed the settlement forms. No revisions. I'm not contesting anything." I walked down the steps and took the envelope. She flinched when our fingers almost touched. I opened it, skimmed the top page. It was all there. Her clean exit. "Okay," I said. Jessica shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She looked smaller than I remembered, like guilt had shrunk her. "I made a mess," she said quietly. "A stupid, blind, pathetic mess. I thought I could escape something I didn't even understand." "You were never trapped," I said. "You just wanted something shinier. Something that told you you were more than you were willing to earn." She nodded. Slowly, a tear slipped down her cheek, and she didn't bother to wipe it. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I thought about it. "No," I said. "Hate needs energy. You took enough of that already." She stared at the porch floor. "Do you still think about me?" "Sometimes," I said. "When I'm remembering who I used to be." She closed her eyes, just for a moment, like the words physically struck her. Then she straightened, nodded, and turned to walk away. She paused once, halfway across the street, and looked back. But I'd already gone inside. Later that night, Kate came over. We cooked together. She danced barefoot in the kitchen while a Van Morrison record played in the next room. No performance. No tension. Just something effortless, like water finding its level. After dinner, we sat on the back steps, passing a bottle of cheap red wine and watching the stars flicker above the pines. "I saw someone parked across the street earlier," she said. "Should I be worried?" "No," I said. "Just a ghost." She leaned her head on my shoulder and said nothing more. We didn't marry. Not yet. We didn't need to. Some people need a ceremony to feel whole. I just needed mornings like the one that followed. Her half asleep at the counter in my flannel shirt, sipping coffee while the sun warmed the kitchen tiles. I never told anyone everything I did. No one ever traced it back to me. Not the inspection photos. Not the whistleblower forms. Not the tip-offs. Wendell disappeared into silence, last rumored to be managing a hardware store near Jacksonville under a fake last name. Jessica stayed down in Macon, last I heard. Picked up work at a call center. Lives alone. Sometimes I wonder if she's waiting for someone new to tell her she matters. I hope not. But I'm not in the business of hoping for her anymore. As for me, I live quietly. I work when I want. I read more. I answer my phone less. I've grown used to the sound of a life that doesn't hum with suspicion. No more second-guessing smiles. No more flinching at late-night texts. Just peace. Not because I won, but because I ended it on my terms. The betrayal didn't define me. What I did next did. And I would do it all again. Every quiet cut, every calculated move, every hour spent in the dark gathering truth like fuel. Because some people bury the knife and try to forget. Me? I pulled it out and built something better with it.